so we can say, oh, we're going to keep working in that watershed for another few years to reach out to more landowners and offer technical assistance, or we've done everything we can possibly do in that area and we're going to move on. So we actually just had a shift, and we're about to start reaching out to a lot of landowners in the Siletz Basin. So it was Big Elk, or was it Little Elk?
Big Elk.
Okay. I just moved to the area, so I'm also learning my geography, but I learn fast. So it was Big Elk Creek for at least 2 years, and now we've switched to the Siletz Watershed. So that gives us a lot of wiggle room and opportunity through the Oregon Department of Agriculture to reach out to landowners living on the main stem and tributaries, to say, hey, we've done some ground truthing, or you've done some ground truthing, and we could see that we can work on some erosion control projects here, or put up some cattle fencing here, or work on a manure storage facility there. And we partner a lot with other parts of the Department of Agriculture, so NRCS primarily, or even our friends, the Mid-Coast Watershed Council. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be great. We have a lot of resources to put to solving problems and increasing water health. And so we're making a big map at this point. So everything is always map-based, right? Or we're going to do it like science-based. So we use the mapping to say, here's where we could really benefit from more work. Here's where maybe we don't have to focus more attention. Maybe that'll be the lower hanging fruit in the future if we run out of other projects. So we're working on that now, and that should be done in January, and then we're going to start working with landowners directly. So call your friends, call me. Oh, I forgot my cards. I'm sorry. I moved this weekend, so I'm like physically and emotionally broken, and I forgot my cards. But Dawn, I know you came into the office, and you can get my information from what's your name?
Evan.
Still.
I was gonna call you Mark. Okay.
Whatever you want.
We have a lot of Marks.
He answers to just about anything.
And then the other big project that, fingers crossed, will get off the ground. We'll find out very end of December if the fundings come through. But we've applied for grant money for a 2-year pilot to reach out to and test the water of rural domestic well owners in Lincoln County. And I say rural because guess what? Most of the wells are in rural areas. But only the numbers say that in the past century or so, only 5% of wells, domestic wells, have been tested in Lincoln County. And that's primarily just, maybe once in a while someone has personal interest in their drinking water supply, but most of the time it's just through real estate transactions. So that automatically leaves out a lot of people who maybe inherited their house from family, or maybe weren't using a traditional bank source, so a lot of to get their house, so family and whatnot. And so we're really reaching out to primarily vulnerable populations, so seniors, pregnant women, young children, but it really covers so much of the folks in Lincoln County. So ideally, if we get this project off the ground, we'll be able to host a number of different well testing events throughout the county. I think we would want to probably kick it off in Siletz, because so many people like yourselves are activated and interested in water health. That's why you're here tonight. And we'll be able to actually send off for free, because of this program, self-collected water samples. So we would give people instructions how to collect water, put it in the jar, close the lid, bring it in, label it, make sure the jar is clean, and send it off to what can often be many hundreds of dollars test, which is why most people don't have it. So I think you guys know what I'm talking about. Do you have a domestic well?
Yes, and we've had it tested, and we've applied many things to keep the water pure. Thousands of dollars invested in it, because we know we have a shallow well, and a lot of people up in the Logsdon area do have shallow wells.
Yeah.
And there's a definite source of pollution up there, and that's what we're worried about. And not to draw any attention to my husband especially, except for the fact he's had cancer twice, and there are pathogens in what's being dumped up there, and I can't prove it, but it seems very suspicious to me that that's continuing to happen, and we have neighbors that have had cancer too. And the source that they put up there, in this last article, it said Class A was safe, Class B not so much, that there was pathogen in it. Well, it's Class B is what they're delivering up there, and they have for years, for 20-some years.
So what's interesting about this grant is that it's not from an environmental group per se, it's from the Oregon Department of Health.
Right.
And then we're getting county match from the Environmental Health Agency.
With Amy Chapman.
Oh yeah, so Amy Chapman is the other person on this,
Right.
the
yeah,
co-applicant.
She called and said that they got the grant. And,
Oh.
yeah. It wasn't approved as she had just entered it, but she was, well, who did tell us that the grant was approved?
We've got about 50% of it approved.
Yeah.
But the other 50% will bring us to
And
100%. And that's
I'm
much
going
better.
through names right now. But
Are you taking, putting out phone numbers so people can call you to put their name on a list, or are you gonna wait till they get the whole grant, or how are you gonna handle it?
We're already collecting folks who have, so whenever I go out into the community, I've been talking about it, and more typically I am prepared with my business card. But
Can you give us a phone number?
Absolutely, I can give you guys my my email and our office phone number.
I know that Evans emails all of us, so he could probably, if he followed up, he could email all of us your contact
How about I
information
send
after.
that tomorrow? So we're
Okay.
really waiting. We've been a little bit underwater with the past 3 weeks with different projects, but the plan is for.
Phone number. We don't do email.
That's fine, and so that's why we're also going to talk about. Actually, you know, it might be great if we find out about getting the 100% of the funds. It would be great to talk to if any of you are interested in ideas or advice for outreach, because I know that the district has had challenges in the past. Mailers are a big part of it. Really visual instructions are a big part of it. Having someone to answer a phone rather than, you know, pop this in online and, you know, fill out this Google form. Because also, not only, you know, do we want to reach different populations that might not be using, you know, digital tools, in rural areas there's also not very great internet access at the same time. So you're missing your folks right there. But if anybody here would be interested in also chatting with me about your ideas of best ways to reach people, but also we're going to be asking all of our community partners, so this group especially in this area, to tell your friends, get your neighbors, because we're going to have these multiple events where it's going to be word of mouth, right? Because that's also how our communities work. And then there'll be a great opportunity to also have workshops and stewardship or learning about stewardship at these events too. So it won't just be, here's your water sample, I'll call you later. It'll also be a great way to engage folks or have other services present there. So other ideas of what you think people in your community need is of interest to me.
Will you be testing springs?
I think we actually will be, if that's what because some people use seeps and springs, and almost all the wells are shallow in the entire county.
And most of them are springs.
Yeah.
Somebody had said there was an aquifer here, but there's no aquifer here. Yeah, there's no
There
aquifer.
might be
It's
a little
spring water.
one further north, but we saw some maps, and I don't think they're really, it's not like the north coast or even south of us. It's very different geologically from my understanding. So that's those are our two big things, and it's all in this area. So I don't know if folks have any ideas or thoughts to share on those services.
One of the centers that you could get is the Little Chief, Rita Peck. I've been in contact with her, and she has gotten terribly sick on her well water. And her well water is just across the river from where it's being dumped. And every time she drinks the water, she gets sick, so she goes on to bottled water. And this was told at a meeting in Toledo by the very person that was doing the application to the fields, and why he did that, because it was not really a good point in his favor. And, yeah, and she's given me her name and that, but if you ask her, I'm sure she could put something on the board there, or even to gather people's names that
Oh,
are interested
yeah.
in it.
Everybody
It would
goes.
be a dead center for
Okay.
Siletz.
I would also suggest maybe having interface with the Logsdon Community Club.
Mm-hmm.
Get this whole upper valley up there, everybody pretty much in contact with them one time or another.
Okay. These are good ideas. Thank you. Because the first step in understanding what is impacting health in an area is having just some data to look at, right? My teacher once said, it's not science till you measure it. So if we don't have any baseline information, this will be a good, just such an important way to learn of what's going on for people to know what's in their water.
Well,
And then
you
what
see
they
how
can
sick
do
the
about
river
it.
got this last for the last 3 summers, the river really was sick on us.
Mm-hmm.
And I've lived on the river for 52 years, so I know what the river has been like in the past. And I have never seen it like it's been, so something is definitely polluting the river.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't help with incredible lack of rain and warm
Right,
temperatures
it was,
too.
but the thing is, in September, when we had gone all summer without rain,
Mm-hmm.
we had applications in May. We did not have them in September this year. But the river cleaned itself, and I have pictures of where the river cleaned itself. And when I went down in September, there was no algae anymore, and if it was gonna grow, it would grow in a warm atmosphere that we had for this summer.
Mm-hmm.
The periwinkles, when it was underneath of the slime, I found very few periwinkles. When I went down in September after the river had cleaned itself for the summer, I only found a few adult ones, but there were thousands of baby periwinkles. So I think really, if we could stop that, the river would clean itself and we would have a clean river.
Are you referring to the desiccants that they spread on the upper river up there? Is that
The
you're-
what?
The desiccants, the sewer treated.
Yeah,
Ways
that's
that-
exactly what
yeah.
I'm referring to.
Okay, because I remember we had a couple meetings here at the Siletz Watershed where they came in and talked about kind of what they were doing, and we voiced our concerns to them then about what kind of concerns people had with them dumping it so many feet within their wells and
Right.
all that kind of stuff. So I was just trying to figure out, you kept referring to them spreading stuff, but it's the
Right.
desiccants they're spreading from the
Well, it's
sewer
the
treatment plant.
cities.
Yeah,
The cities are what are doing
Sure.
it. And of the cities that are implicated, actually 3 of them, we've got stopped. John was responsible for getting Lincoln City stopped. Newport is taking theirs now to Wren, out in the valley. They're no longer dumping along the river. I don't know whether they're dumping along the river out there, but this is our Siletz, so, on the farm.
Contract, 5
Yeah.
year contract.
Depot Bay has put in a plant to dry theirs. They say they're not gonna dump anymore, at least that's the message I got from DEQ, was that they had actually instigated it, not DEQ. The city itself said they were going to not do it anymore. And,
I believe that was right after a major meeting that a lot of us attended and voiced our concerns.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the
And
August
high
meeting.
level of objections, and so they changed their course.
Well, if we all eat less. Just putting that out there. Just a thought. Yeah, I wish I had been able to make that August meeting, but I didn't know I was gonna work here yet.
Pretty intense.
I heard. But, and then in addition, I guess the other project we're working on is with the DEQ, so doing monthly water testing of a number of different, so we're not testing for biological activity in the water with that. We're testing more the velocity of the river, the temperature, conductivity, so if there's heavy metals or salts in
but
the
you're not
water.
testing for the right thing. You need to be testing for pathogens and things
Yeah.
that are in the water that are going to be affecting not only human life, but the life that lives on the river and in the river.
Yeah, so we actually do test for nitrogenous well, not nitrogenous waste in the water, but nitrogen levels and nitrates in the water when we do that testing. So that will tell us, you know, especially after rain or where, if it's near ag or near industrial silviculture
Runoff.
land, if we're getting, and then being able to maybe measure some of that runoff as an indicator. But with the well testing, we are going to be, the basics that we're going to test for are E. coli, nitrates, arsenic, and what is the last one? Arsenic, nitrates, E. coli. Oh, and coliform bacteria. So with the domestic well testing, we will be testing for things found in waste products.
Which the nitrates is what feeds the algae.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and phosphorus too.
Yeah, phosphorus is a big issue that people usually look over, especially when it's feeding freshwater algae blooms, whereas more estuarine or saltwater algae likes the nitrogen even more so. And often phosphates are put into water to prevent lead from leaching from pipes. That's a big issue where I'm from, and so...
But they took phosphorus out of our detergents in order to stop the algae growth.
Yeah.
And now they're putting it out on the fields to go into the river. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
How many trucks loads?
Well, let's see. In May, we had what, 500,000 gallons brought out? I know, but I'm rounding. There was at least 500,000 gallons taken out to one farmer's field.
Yeah, that was adjacent to one of our.
It wasn't fertilizer application. This was dumping to get rid of it.
Mm.
And it went on for 11 days in the rain. And this was what I pointed out to Paul Kennedy, that all his stack of rules, and I read them, they don't monitor or do any of it. And so you think of the Department of Environmental Quality as somebody that's going to protect our environment? No, these are the ones that are giving the permits to do this.
But how many truckloads they do a day?
A day, there's 2 trucks that load, that run a day at 5,000 gallons a truckload, and they would make 6 trips a day, and they ran for 11 days. You can do the math.
On 100 acres, if I remember right,
Yeah, on 100 acres.
and with very little setback.
And the river's right there. The field is just above the river.
Yeah, they count the slope to the river as
Footage?
footage for their setback, literally. So they act, because there's usually about 50 feet, you know, down to the river because it's so incised, and so they spray right up to the edge and just spread it, and they don't set it back.
You talk to DEQ, they'll tell you there's a 200-foot setback.
That's what they're.
And then you say, who stakes out the setback? And they say the municipality is supposed to. So, well, they're trying to get rid of their sleds, so they're gonna squeeze every foot they can get. That's what their job is, get rid of it. And the farmer wants every bit he can get, so his job is to help him fudge a little bit too. And so this is just an ongoing thing. I would like to make a little report. We're kind of chewing through this thing piecemeal.
Yeah, right
Yeah,
there.
we're moving right into
I think we're on
BioSolids,
3.
so
Started and
go for it.
That's what we're all here for, isn't
Yeah,
it?
sure.
Last Thursday, DEQ proclaimed that there was a public meeting to discuss the approval of 7 permits for dumping sewage sludge, parent, biosolids in this area along the Siletz River. Those of us that have dealt with them in the past, and they had our email address, we actually got notified. Now remember, by the way, this information I'm giving you now, I'm going to the county commissioner meeting tomorrow to voice objections. It's supposed to be a public meeting. Number one, there was no public announcement whatsoever.
No.
Zero, nothing in the paper, nothing on the radio. And so, you know, you're not gonna get many people there if you don't tell them. Number two, they held it in the Visual Arts Center on the top deck. And the elevator was closed and locked, the bottom deck was closed and locked. Therefore, anybody that wanted to go to that meeting had to be able to climb up 3 flights of stairs outside, obviously eliminating any handicapped people that wanted to come. And there's a law that says if you have a public meeting, you must allow handicap capability. The other things that I kind of noticed was that although these 7 permits, 5 for Toledo, 1 for the inn at Otter Rock, and 1 for the city of Siletz, and yet they didn't hold the meeting in any of these places. They held it in Newport. Wonder why. You'd think they would hold it close to the area of where the BioSolids are going to be derived from. The meeting was scheduled for 2.5 hours, and as you came in, they had you sign up a card if you wished to speak. Some of us did. They limited us to 6 minutes, which is inadequate. 5 minutes, 5 minutes, and then they said there'd be a question and answer period after that. There was none. They stood around and talked and waiting for somebody to do something, and eventually the people just went home.
They said they were gonna have a 5-minute break.
5-minute break, and they never reconvened. So there was never any public question and answer period at all.
Dang, I missed that filming because I didn't have it on my big card.
So anyway, this meeting was set up for 2.5 hours. Short of an hour and a half, they cut everybody off. And by the way, part of that time was taken up by an employee himself getting up and voicing his opinion. I thought it was for public, but I didn't know DEQ's employees were part of the public in Lincoln County, being as he didn't live here.
Can I ask which employee it was?
Pardon?
Which employee was it?
DEQ employee?
Oh, okay.
It says this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, we're not doing anything wrong.
Oh,
And took
okay.
up 5 minutes of the discussion time that we might have been able to use.
Yeah.
Do you know who it was, John?
I don't recall his name.
Okay.
Young fellow though. Works with those group that were there.
From Eugene.
From Eugene.
And my own personal opinion, nothing to prove, is that they seem, in talking to them, trying to set up almost a standoff, shall we say, between the public that was interested on one side, and they got the municipalities that had to get rid of their biosolids, and the farmers who wants the biosolids on the other side. And if they can get us squabbling amongst ourselves, they just sit back at the side and they don't really say or do anything. So it's just a method of calling a meeting that they're required to do by law, and then, in my opinion, doing everything they could to sabotage it. So I will be entering a complaint with the Lincoln County Commissioners tomorrow morning on that subject.
Well, the people that receive it on their land, they get paid for that?
Yes.
And then they don't have to pay for fertilizer in return. So
Well-
if there's any testing that needs to be done, it should be the cities and the people that are using it on their, they should actually pay for it.
I've
If there is
appro-
no other choice.
Yeah, I've approached DEQ several times, and what they've done is they've put a protocol together that's supposed to guarantee our safety, our drinking water, in this case. Unfortunately, the protocol is totally inadequate because it's so full of loopholes. And the more I get involved in it, the more loopholes I find. I can go through a list right here in about 5 minutes for you that give you some kind of an idea. One of the requirements is if you apply biosolids for 3 years in succession, you're required after the second year and before the third year to do soil testing of the site you're applying it on. What most of them do is they apply 2 years and skip a year, apply 2 years and skip a year, so they never put it on 3 years, so therefore they never do any testing. And this is what happened to Lincoln City on the farmer's field across from where I live. They had been out there almost 20 years and never did any testing, because they, in their mind, were sure they were doing nothing wrong, because they followed the protocol. The second one is that if you do this and you do it at 100% as an agronomic rate, which is basically in this area about 100 pounds an acre of nitrogen. And but the way it's written up, if you only put on 90 pounds, you don't have to test. So you can avoid the test. The testing costs money. Nobody wants to pay the money. The farmer's not going to pay it, and the communities in most cases can't hardly afford it. So this list of rules they have that's supposed to protect us are totally inadequate. And the next thing you go to is, well, they did test some time back in the past. I did a lot of research, and I came up in the last, since 2005, what's that, 14 years? The most any site had any tests for was 2 tests on any site. That was the most. Some one, some none. So we have a lot of sites that never tested whatsoever, like Lincoln City did. And then they have a lot of other baseline testing requirements. If you do these tests, you're supposed to test for certain elements, 6 elements. Of all the tests I found, half of them they only tested for 3. So they didn't even test for the full amount that DEQ specified they would test for. That's number 1. Number 2, testing parameters say you'll take soil samples, combine them from the 0 to 12-inch mark. Take 7 samples, combine them, and that'll be a test. From 12 to 24 inch, combine them, that'll be a test. On no test on any site was there ever a 2-level test made. Period. None. 0. So again, but DEQ does not enforce any of this. All they do is find a way around for them. And so you've got this protocol, which is supposed to be our safety net, supposed to keep us safe. And if you read it, it just gets deeper and deeper. On any pasture, there's different types of soils, loams and various things. In their protocol, it says you will make tests on each type of soil. And I spoke to Mr. Kennedy, who is the representative, to see if this is supposed to be done. And he said, oh no, we can't make them do that. The farmers wouldn't even know what type of soil it was. I said, wait a minute, you wrote it in your protocol. To make these tests, you have to make it on each different type of soils in your pasture.
I think a lot of farmers would know.
Well, it's not the farmer's problem. The farmer's not supposed to do the testing. The communities that apply it are supposed to do the testing.
Yeah.
So he doesn't even know what he's talking about in his own protocol. But there was some other really strong things that came out, and that was the setback enforcements that we talked earlier about are not enforced at all. The easy ones maybe, but they'll say 200 feet from drinking water sources. Well, originally they just considered a drinking water source as a well. Well, after banging on their heads, they agreed that because about 15 to 20,000 people drink out of the Siletz River, maybe that's a drinking source. So they said, okay, you have to get 200 feet back from the Siletz River. Well, one of the application sites is on Rock Creek, about 500 yards up from where it empties into the Siletz River. Does that apply to Rock Creek, Rocky Creek? Why not? It's 500 yards from where it dumps into the Siletz River, which is a water source. So therefore, I would assume that Rocky Creek is a water source, and it's the largest tributary in the Upper Siletz Valley.
And that's right across from your property, right?
Right now, basically. Yeah, but that's negated because that's not considered a water source. Okay. And one of the main things I really got concerned about is in the paper over the last year or so. You're well aware in the wintertime it's getting a lot of rain. And particularly the city of Toledo has got ancient broken down systems. And with all the rain and the water seepage getting into their sewage system, they're getting a lot more than normal in that period of time. Well, they really only do two things. They say they treat the sewage. What they do is they raise the temperature a very few degrees to start bacterial action, and then they pump what they refer to as oxygen. I call it air because that's all it is. And because oxygen accelerates bacterial action. So that's the two things they do. And then they let it sit there and marinate for a period of time and say, okay, it broke down everything, got rid of all the bad stuff, now we can take it out and dump it. Well, you're required to have what they call a BOD specific, which basically is a measurement of that amount of oxygen that's in the water that allows this bacteria to break down. Toledo has, I think they're on their like 5th or 6th warning and paying fines because they don't meet their specifications. So if the BOD rate doesn't meet it, that means the bacteria rate is not breaking down. That means that this sludge that they're taking out there and dumping is not meeting the requirements it's supposed to meet. You're not breaking all the bad stuff down, right? Or even half of it.
Yeah.
I can't get anybody to talk to me about it.
And they don't compost it after they oxygenate it? Like in big windrows?
I think they're testing it after they either a tank or a pond, I'm not quite sure where they're at. And they test it, and if it doesn't have the proper amount, then they're subject to fine. And but the big argument is always the same: money. These little communities don't have a lot of money, and so DEQ comes to them and says, "Look, we're going to fine you." And they said, "Fine us? We don't have any money to pay you. Where are you going to get it at?" And they, "Well, next time we're going to fine you, and if you do it again." And so consequently, this goes on and on and on. Last week, they just dumped, I don't know, 160,000 gallons of raw sewage in the Yaquina Bay with a pipe break. That's the third pipe break at the same point, by the way.
That was Toledo, right?
Toledo. Yeah.
Well, in Depot Bay, since they put in their dryer plant and not bringing out here, they're also pumping into the ocean at 500,000 gallons a day into the ocean.
And that's pretty interesting when you stop and think about it. I just got into this by mistake almost, and I've been doing a little research, and it turns out that, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe in 1978, the U.S. government came out with some scientific studies and said you have to stop dumping your sewage in the ocean because you're poisoning it. So it's so poisoned we can't dump it in the ocean, but we can take it up here, stir it around, heat it up 3 degrees, throw some air into it, and let it sit in the pond for a while, and we can take it out and put it on these fields right alongside the river so it can get back into our drinking water. That doesn't make any sense to me.
It comes down the river, then 5 cities draw their water out of it.
So anyway, that's kind of a little bit of the things that I covered up there.
What time is the meeting tomorrow?
9:30 every Wednesday, the county commissioners meet.
Oh, okay.
You're allowed, you go and you may have to set a while to get the opportunity to speak.
Is it on the agenda tomorrow, though? Is the BioSolids on the agenda
No,
tomorrow?
I'm going in and talk to them, though. Other information is that we have been in previously to talk to the county commissioners, and they have responded, and that's the good thing. And the problem is this: Oregon State has total control of all biosolids, period. The county has no say, cities have no say, the local people who live out here have no say. So we have no authority whatsoever, so we can't make anybody do anything. And so what's happened is the commissioners have looked into this, and they went to Representative Gomberg and asked him to put an item on the agenda for the assembly and try to get some authority transferred out to these counties so they can do some type of protection. And what we talked about a little bit was, hey, why don't you just say you can't dump biosolids in these areas that provide potable water to your citizens, particularly public potable water. Shouldn't be putting this stuff in that watershed, period. Beyond that, if they could let the county have an approval, disapproval on site application, so that to keep them away from areas of, that could be infected worse.
And it sounds like just basic oversight of the regulations that are already there too.
I don't know how far they're gonna go, they're just trying to work on it, man, and so, I was very heartened just the fact that they took it on. Based on that, I was gonna go ahead and talk to them, give them an attaboy and a pat in the back, and then complain to them about the, public meeting that wasn't very public. And then the last thing, I'm contemplating and open to suggestions. I think I'm gonna get a hold of Gomberg and set up a meeting for representatives from our county here. And I talked to you about getting Midcoast's name on the list, of course, Siletz Watershed Council. I've talked to the biologist with the tribe, and he's going to see if he can get permission to go up as a tribal representative. And I would like Lincoln Soil and Water representative to go up,
Yeah.
so that we can show them that we are people representing organizations, not just individuals. Individuals don't get anywhere. I've been that road for only 20 years now. But if we can go in there with 4 or 5 or 6 organization representatives and lay it on his desk, then he would have more information to put forth if this comes up on the agenda to be discussed.
Did you say that, Andy Wainwright?
And Madwary, yeah.
And that he would speak?
I talked to him and he asked that if I went with this, to set it off until February, to give him the opportunity to go before the tribal council and get permission to do it, because he has to have permission.
Yeah, I
he said
think-
that he doesn't have the authority.
No.
Matter of fact, he's been told not to,
Oh.
but that's before.
And because the tribe has already sent a letter to the governor, which was what initiated that meeting in Lincoln City back in September, October, whatever it was.
You remember Hall Thursday night? Claire Hall?
Claire Hall, yes.
But you speak of the Claire Hall.
Yeah, they did have, one of the commissioners, Claire Hall, was there at that meeting, couldn't stay for the whole thing, but basically presented a letter that the commissioners had put together from Lincoln County Commissioners to DEQ, expressing their deep displeasure with the way things were going, and requesting that some action be taken, such as, let's don't put any more biosolids in our watersheds how their drinking water is coming out of, things like that. They might as well have been throwing rocks in the ocean. DEQ paid them absolutely no attention whatsoever. And previously they had sent letters to the various cities, communities around here, asking them to refrain from dumping up in this area if they had any other alternative. And I don't know what all of them did, but I was at the meeting in Toledo when their commissioners met, and they almost laughed at it. If you have no authority over us, we're going to continue doing what we want to.
And they're saying their biosolids, there's nothing wrong with them, because somebody was talking to me about that. He says, really be fined a great amount by the federal government. But then I think you can't force people to tell the truth either.
Yeah. Well, there's been testing, and you want to look up USGS, and you'll find they've done a lot of testing, and they found all types of things that are bad for us. Initiating out of all kinds of poison sprays, cleaning solvents, birth controls, pharmaceuticals, drugs, everything's in there.
Chemicals.
They're just saying how much, and of course DEQ is saying, well, there's not enough in there to bother you. Well, how do you know? They're not ever tested. They test for 8 heavy metals, and that is all they test for.
Well, Emily, are you consider going to be meeting tomorrow morning. John Sullivan.
With the commissioners.
Oh, to attend the meeting as well?
Yes,
I could go and observe. I don't have anything prepared.
I'm just basically gonna lay on them what I've already talked to you about tonight, so.
It is right next door.
I'm not a formal speaker, so.
Yeah.
I
Well, I
just
think
lay
you're doing
facts
a
out
really
there and
good
let 'em
job.
deal.
Yeah, it's at 9:30. I could go observe.
You'll probably sit there for about an hour before you get any opportunity from anybody, because they have their agenda that they have to cover. They're running a county, so.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll, if you sign up, they'll give you the opportunity usually to speak if you want.
Okay. I have some phone calls. I have some phone meetings in the morning, so we'll see. Because I wasn't planning on it, but I could try.
I would
I
say
think it's
one
important to
other thing
try.
that kind of, I guess it's good and bad, it's, I talked to one of the Toledo City Commissioners, and, oh, this has been about a year ago. And I kinda got pretty blunt about it. I said, you realize that you are probably the largest culprit in probably spoiling our water up there that you're drinking. And look at it this way, you guys flush your toilets, put stuff down your sinks, goes through the pipes, you treat it a little bit, you put it in the truck, you take it out there, you spread it on a field, it soaks in, it hits a rock underneath, some of it only 14 inches deep, by the way, that's another problem they have, and it goes downhill to the river. And I said, guess what? 5 miles downstream, you've got a pump pumping your drinking water out of the river back to your people. I said, I'm gonna be brutally straight with you. I said, you're drinking your own piss. As simple as that. And so, based on that, he went to the public works officer, and I suggested that they at least apply it downstream from their water intake. So they've been trying to do that. So that's why everything's going to Crucibores now. It's below town.
Joseph Bars is right down there.
Right there by Euchre Creek.
Yeah. That's where Rita Peck lives, that's where she's getting sick.
Just across the bridge right now. And that's one of the sites that I can't find any testing for ever. And that's also one of the sites that Lincoln City proclaimed as saturated and stopped applying. And he just went to Toledo, and Toledo went back to DEQ, and lo and behold, 2 years later, he got a new permit to start applying from Toledo on the same property. With no testing. The other thing I did request is I requested a baseline test on all these sites, because you get issuing new 5-year permits. I got turned down cold. They don't want to do any baseline testing. They don't want to know what's there, because if they do, they might have to do something about it. By the way, on those permits, just for your information, most of them originally were issued in around 2005 for 5 years. They ran out in 2010, and they've been running without permits for 8 years, over 8 years. And so after you push on them real hard in front of the state senator, state representative, they agreed they better issue some new permits. And that's what this is all about. That's why this meeting is held.
Okay, I do the fields quarter mile inwards of the river, quarter mile or eighth a mile. And I do recommend that they do truck it over the valley.
So I mean, the problem you're gonna have with any broad statement to the DEQ is that they're gonna look at it and say, well, yeah, you're talking about the Siletz, you wanna be below this point in the Siletz. If we make a ruling, then that pertains to the valley and everything, and when you look at, like you said, trucking it to the valley, well, then you're all of a sudden talking about the Willamette watershed system and everything downstream on the Willamette from any point of the thing all the way down to Wilsonville. They're taking drinking water out of Wilsonville, so you'd be talking about, I mean, if you drew a map of the state of Oregon, you'd be talking about, for drinking water,
the problem in another place.
it's probably about 98% of the state would be falling into that drinking water thing, and that's why DEQ just looks at and goes, what? Yeah, we can't. But I mean, here, I mean, it makes sense in your own backyard, but to DEQ, they're not looking at it from that aspect, and that's the unfortunate part.
Yeah, but they don't have to do dumping at all. There is a solution.
I'm right there with you, I totally agree. I remember, like I said, when they came out here and we talked to them in this meeting, the first time they came out, and they had one of the representatives come out and talk about, you know, why they're doing it, the farmers are getting paid, so the farmers are taking money, the farmers are doing this stuff, they're providing. I get that there's a lot of other options, but I'm just saying that that's the problem you run into when you're talking about trying to get DEQ to make a regulation for what
We
would fit
need
for
Aaron
you.
Brockovich.
The problem always rises, goes back to the same
I'm gonna
point.
get her.
Any other option is gonna cost more money. And these municipalities don't have any more money. DEQ knows they don't have any more money. And so to propose something that some other method that's gonna cost money that they haven't got, so they can't do it. And so it just, we get into a stalemate.
But we've got three cities to do it. So Depot Bay is not that much bigger than Toledo.
Yeah.
And they did it. They built their plant. Lincoln City built their plant.
To treat it more adequately.
They dry
dewater
it. They
They dry
dry
Yeah.
it. And they
They don't dump it.
pack it and they take it out to Coffin Butte and they bury it in the ground. They don't even have to do that. In Hillsborough, they had the problem and they took it and dried it and put it into little tiny pellets and put it in bags and they sell it to gardeners.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a,
So does Metro, I
And we're
think.
talking about two things though. The pellets that's sold, that's a class A, and quite a bit more processing. To get to a class A, we can sell it as a commercial fertilizer. Okay, the other ones, they call it drying, but in essence, it really isn't drying. What they do is they run it through a centrifuge and get rid of all the liquid out of it, reducing the overall weight and size so they can more easily truck more at a time,
Yeah.
and they take it over and bury it.
Yeah, dewatering it is part of the process that I'm more familiar with after, and then even composting it to get it up to 200 degrees to kill the E. coli and things like that.
I don't know of anybody that's advocated it.
It sounds like, I mean, it sounds like just the demand needs to also be following basic
Well, I
rules.
approached this about 2 years ago, to 2 or 3 different entities, trying to get them to put a Class A plant in Lincoln County that all of these municipalities could use. They could truck the biosolids to a Class A plant that was ran by the county or some other entity within the county, and they pay their fair share. And there's no one it's too big. It's too big a project for anybody to take on. So nothing has been done in that aspect. I even approached a tribe. I said, look, you've got land. You probably could come up with the money if you wanted to, and you could provide some employment for some of your unemployed people. So it would be a win-win-win thing. So far, nothing. So we've tried to come up with some innovative ideas of how to get around this, but to date, nothing has been sold.
I've been working and doing a lot of research, John, and looking at countries that don't spread their biosolids. Japan is one of the leading countries, and they are taking all their biosolids, all their biomass, all their trash, all, instead of hauling it to Coffin Butte, it would go into a digester that will burn all the biomasses of all different kinds, including plastics, including all of it, to create electricity.
That's the wastewater treatment plant by my house that I grew up in. It's a biodigester, and as it decomposes the plant, because it has to run for 24 hours a day. It's also the largest wastewater treatment plant in the country. It makes its own, it uses the methane to generate electricity to run it, so. And it's self-contained, so you don't smell it. Have you reached out to, because I really do think that from working with county employees like Amy Chapman, it seems like the pressure that, although it's taken you 20 years, right, the pressure is really getting to people.
Mm-hmm.
Have you reached out to any like press outlets or anything like that?
Constantly.
I've talked to a lot of people, but look, everybody has their own axe to grind too, so that's the problem. You gotta understand, I started out almost 20 years ago as a person,
Yeah.
and I'm computer illiterate, so I'm pretty well handicapped. So if it's not on the telephone or in a letter, you've about lost me. And fortunately, we're getting a lot more people involved.
Well, yeah, and it's from newspaper articles. I've saved all the newspaper articles, that have come out about it, and I've got pages and pages. So it's not like the county is ignorant of what's happening. And a lot of people definitely are beginning to see what's happening. But they're like us. What do? We've got a state organization called the DEQ that we can't budge. They don't want to deal with this, and what do you do? I mean, I've even been to the Secretary of State, and he sent it all on to the auditor, and I've never got a response from the auditor. So, what do? You can't get your own government to help you out in a situation like this.
But we're further along than we were 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah, we are. We definitely are.
We at least have people aware that we exist. And we've got some of our politicians involved into it. That meeting that we had up in Lincoln City, I thought was a very good meeting. And but again, until the state tells DEQ different, they're going to continue on just like they are. They are not going to change anything themselves, and they've got a protocol that's so wishy-washy that they can get by anywhere, anytime with anybody. You can't nail them down. It's like shifting sand. They write up specific, say, oh yeah, you must do this, but before the end of the paragraph, it's always if and but. So there really is no hard and fast rules of any kind, except you must test 8 heavy metals. And by the way, all of this is self-monitoring. You know who does the testing? The people that send it out to be spread, not DEQ.
So it's a fox watching after the chicken.
Yeah, if you were working in Toledo and you were saying, hey, I'm going to test these 8 metals, and you say, oh geez, those 2 don't meet, but I haven't got any place to stack this crap, I got to get rid of it. So go ahead out there, no one else is going to check it. Once it's gone, it's gone.
The state won't do anything. What about federal? Isn't there federal guidelines?
Yes, there is, but DEQ has married their guidelines under the federal. And the federal did it very loosely because in 1978, you can't dump your crap in the ocean anymore, you got to put it somewhere else. And then they come up with this magic program, but they had to do it instantaneous. And so all over the country, it's the same way. They've got places on the East Coast where they're shipping their crap out by train and dumping it until somebody catches them and stops them. So.
Well, there's one thing that's happened recently, and that's the EPA Inspector General's office has issued a paper that says that the biosolids are not being tested properly for what they need to be tested for. And I've got that, and I'll get that to Evan. And I had another one report that was 2 years before that involves the fact that they're not testing for enough chemicals and for preventing our water from being contaminated. The EPA is mandated by courts, by legislators, that they have to provide us clean water. Only humans, we're working on that. The UN has already recognized that nature is very important to us, and they're an indicator species for us. And we're working on that in Lincoln County to get that adopted, where nature is protected along with humans. And there are people working on it. There's people that aren't here tonight that John and you guys are aware of. that are working really hard, and they've got some help. And I know when John was trying to fight with Lincoln City, I helped him a little bit. He didn't know, I don't think, because I sent Lincoln City a mandate. I went and read a bunch of law. And I said, by dang, you're not meeting your mandate. And then I said, John, go get a soil test. Go bug them until they do it. And he did. So it's all of us working together that makes the difference. I'm really scared. The difference in the river in the last 5 years has really been huge. All the critters are dying. Their fish aren't coming no more. They talked the other night about the biosolids affecting the flavor of the river for salmon, so they don't know where to go anymore. You know, they're going wandering off and not coming here because it doesn't taste like it's supposed to. So I know that we're going to make a difference on this subject, and it's going to affect America. And we're going to lead the way. And all of us have been working on it for a long time, but we're all getting old too. Bunches of us.
One other area might of interest, particularly fishermen here.
Pictures of the
DEQ has another section, if you will. Has to do more with fisheries and health of the rivers towards fish. And they have a biologist by the name of David Maltz. And he made quite a bit of testing for a couple of year period of time on the upper Siletz.
We work with him a lot.
And I've been in contact with him. Probably doesn't want to hear from me anymore, but I'm bugging him about every 60 days because they completed the tests. And I'm, of course, I want to know what's going on, and they no, we have to get the data collected. So they collected the data. Okay, what's going on? No, we have to analyze the data. And so this has been going on and on and on. We're over 2 years now. Mm-hmm. But the last time I talked to him, he said that they're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, number one, on this testing, and this is in the upper Siletz from Moonshine down to roughly Twin Bridges area. Mm-hmm. And he said that one of the things that they specifically noticed, and they're measuring primarily temperature mm-hmm. and soluble oxygen mm-hmm. in the water, okay? Mm-hmm. So one of the indicators, and he said they're not prepared to say what caused it, mm-hmm. but one of the indicators was that they saw where the oxygen level in the water was dramatically different between the day and the night. Mm-hmm. Well, in the daytime you get the sunshine and it warms the water up, and then your algae, as it dies, it starts consuming oxygen, and that's why it depletes the water of oxygen. And because the Siletz River is got an endangered species called coho that runs up it, and so he thinks that might be a way of approaching it, if they can come up, regardless of what's causing it. The algae is there, and we know what makes algae grow, nitrogen and phosphorus, and it's more there than I've ever seen. I've been fishing on that river and living there for about 40 years. So.
And with more plants in the water, they're going to transpire differently from the day to the night, using oxygen and then making oxygen.
Sure.
Yeah.
But he said there was an abnormal difference.
I would be interested to see if there was a water temperature variation then at the same time, or whether there was.
We also have a summer steelhead run on the coast for the Siletz that is very unique in that it's the only coastal river, I think, that has a wild native summer steelhead run on the entire coast. So it would be something that is very unique, and that would be a prime, that's when those fish are in the water, that's when they're there, that's when they're.
Those are natives, so that would be protected.
So he indicated that because the coho are listed as an endangered species, may be able to use that as a pry bar to, hey, we're killing this endangered species, and we know one of the things we're doing is lack of oxygen, and we know what's causing a lack of oxygen, and the rotting and degradation of the algae, and so what's making this great amount of algae that hasn't been there before. Mm-hmm. But we're back to that point, basically. He's not willing to put it on paper and put a name to it yet, but that's what I got gleaned from him between the lines.
Yeah, he's a very serious scientist, so he'll always say, I am not prepared to say this, and I am not prepared to say that, and here's the data objectively, which I really respect.
So anyway, I just want to bring that out because
Yeah.
I'm sure these two fellows here, they're here because they're interested in the fishing on the Siletz River and they can see a tie through.
Sure.
Where this is all tied together.
I think the overall health of it, I mean, we talked about that when they talked about adding a, 10 CFS, removal of the water out of the Siletz there at the town of Siletz when we talked to them about drinking water. I mean, you just don't know what kind of effect that has on a river-wide system of maybe raising the temperature half a degree, and it could cause, our summer Chinook population no longer be a viable, so I mean, there's so much of it you don't know that I just think.
And that's what the other thing is, we always run back to what do you know and what do you don't know. Anytime you say, I think this is causing it, the reply is, well, you can't prove it.
Sure.
And so it costs money, lots of money to do prolonged testing, as you folks know. And so that's the barrier, again, money. You can't get the money to get the testing to prove that what's happening is happening. And so you can't get anybody to change anything. They don't have to prove that they're not, we have to prove that they are. And therein lies the difference.
Do
Well-
you farm your property?
I'm not yet.
Okay.
Well, there's oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, Emily, you said that you have, you're the water district working for it. What, is there a section of the river you guys look at, or is it the entire water drainage? I mean, are you from,
We can work from beginning to end.
okay, so I just wasn't sure if you were like specifically doing, from a certain spot. to a certain
Oh, for
spot.
that testing that I mentioned?
Or whatever you guys are doing. You said you moved here from Big Elk. Or
Oh, yeah. Well, we can, really, it's going to be a lot of projects. We'd like all the projects to match each other or like match up to other projects that we're working on. So, in order to optimize all the funding available. But yeah, we don't have any restrictions along the river of where we can. Do you have a project in mind?
No, I just was curious. I was curious because you described it.
Looking for
But at
projects.
the time I was looking to say, well, how big of an area are you talking about?
Pretty big. 69 miles, the river. 67.
Job security.
Yeah, if there's environmental problems, I'll always have a job. Yeah, but we still have, we had a lot of staffing changes, as a lot of you all in the room probably recognize at the district, and so our project, all of our work and technical assistance and all those time periods have shifted. We would have hoped to have started already, but getting all that mapping done has taken a lot longer. That was supposed to be done in August. We had the person who was previously in my role left, and then my role, or her role, kind of became two different roles. So, but all in all, we're pretty flexible, and the more we can match up all these other interests with work along the Siletz with technical assistance like domestic well testing, maybe we can also get more people involved in your watershed council at the same time, or maybe we can connect with the Coho business plan at the same time as we're working on a residential project. So targeted, but
dispersed.
But
dispersed.
Targeted and well thought out, but dispersed and extremely fast.
Cindy?
Thank you. Well, there's a couple things. The way that I think they tie your hands, Emily, is that they don't allow you to test what you need to test for, as far as biosolids are concerned.
I can. I just need the money to do it.
Right. I agree with
I'm
that.
allowed to do whatever I want.
Good. That's why we love you.
Just keep money to do it.
Well, we'll work on that. I'll help you with that.
Okay.
And the other elephant in the room, as Aaron would say, which used to be, you know, the, what am I supposed to say?
Invasive weeds guy.
Yeah. But before he did that, he did Siletz Watershed Council for quite a few years.
Oh.
Like 10 years or so, pretty close to that, John, or 7 or something, I can't remember.
7 years, maybe?
But what,
7 years.
yeah, a while.
Aaron?
How do you pronounce his last name?
Duzik.
Duzik, thank you. Yeah.
I don't think he was there.
4 years.
4 years? I can't remember.
4 years.
Yeah. But he made the statement that when we were talking about the biosolids, you know, I went and asked him, you know, what is his opinion on that? And he says, I think they're poison. And, you know, that's basically what he said. I think they're poison. But that's not the big elephant in the room. And I look at him and he goes, timber using chemicals and timber using chemicals for fertilizer is a big elephant in the room. Right, and a lot of it has the same kind of.
How often do they do that? Is there like a decoy stuff? Well, they use it once,
5 years.
5 years.
They clear cut. They sit fallow for that first fall, usually into the winter. And then the spring, they start in spraying. And they do it for 5 years and denude all of the clear cut of any indigenous species, period. And they just keep it doing it. And they plant GMO trees that are resistant to the spray. So therefore, it denudes the soil erodes, and all those chemicals and fertilizer are going down in the river. So it's not just one thing, you know, and I'm 350 Oregon Central Coast, which is a climate action group, and we believe in 1 million cuts is what's going on to our ecosystem. That the damage that's being done is humans. Humans are doing the damage, and we can stop doing the damage. We can choose not to.
Well, this is not a new subject.
No, it isn't.
Been looked at many, many, many times, and the bottom line again is money.
Money, money, money.
I happen to know that Stan Vandewetter spent several years researching this out and then lectured on it and everything, and to the point where he was finally told to sit down and shut up. They're getting too much pressure back from the timber company. So,
Yeah, I had an event today with a timber company, man. With coho
That's a whole nother.
and beaver.
So, anything else to add for now?
I guess my last question, I'll try to make the meeting at 9:30 is at City Hall.
County commissioners.
County courthouse.
County courthouse.
Okay. Evan will tell me exactly.
It's a big building.
I'm going in there blind, so I'm not on, not on their agenda,
Okay.
but they usually will allow you to speak for a short time. You can't
Five-
get for
5 minutes.
Because their time is pretty valuable.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm basically just going to cover two things. One, I think they ought to go to the state and reject this meeting because it wasn't a public meeting.
Mm-hmm.
What's Wayne Belmont doing right now? He's supposed to be,
He's the one I tried to talk to, but I couldn't get through to him.
Well, also when you cut corners with environmental health issues, over time, you may end up with terrible environmental health problems like, Flint, Michigan is the best example I can think of. Yeah, it's cheaper to do this. So I think that there is a lot of pressure from the county level because half of the well testing is already promised money from the county as well. So I think you definitely have some friends there. But my other question would be if you've talked or met with other folks around the country who maybe have been dealing with this issue and asked them how they figured it out. I don't know how to call them.
I don't think they're gonna come out to my house and launch them. I don't have a place to
Everybody
start.
loves Oregon though, they might come out. I think in Colorado was a big place where this
Chetco
was.
River was having a problem too with the algae, and they got just about as far as we've gotten. But it was over BioSolids as well.
Yeah, we'll say 2 years ago in Tidewater, we talked about it here at the meetings, but we had the first time we've seen an algae bloom in Tidewater of this river in the months of, August, September, and October. And I mean, I know the LC tends to have one every summer, but it was the first time and only time in, 30 years of being on this river that I've ever seen an algae bloom in Tidewater where it went up and down with the tide for, a couple month period and stuff like that. But I know a couple people did ask about fisheries here on the coast and that kind of stuff, and I will say the good news was that the Siletz was kind of the lone bright spot up and down the coast this year for Chinook returns, and where a lot of other rivers had a massive struggle to have Chinook returns for some reason, maybe of where our fish spent their time in the ocean or whatever, they actually came back in really big numbers. They held a lot higher this year in Tidewater than they've ever held, so people like Coyote Rock and that kind of stuff may not have seen that huge return, but the fish were there. They spawned in huge numbers early in the year in the kind of upper Tidewater section, from a mile above Cedar Creek to maybe a mile above Morgan Park. They were pretty prolific in that section.
They couldn't go any further.
They couldn't go any further, so they.
But
what I'm saying is,
200 or 300 at a time in their spawning.
What I'm saying is, there's times where they were going to all these other streams and they weren't seeing any fish, and they were coming to the Siletz, and there was times where you could drift from Morgan to Strom and see 500 fish spawning, and so we kind of relayed a lot of that information of what we were seeing to department staff, that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of discussion at the time of closing the coast, of leaving just the Siletz open. But our concern with leaving just the Siletz open was you would have people coming from all over the place. I mean, we actually, once they reopened it, we saw people from Tillamook and various areas coming down here and fishing and that kind of stuff. But fortunately, it kind of was after the rains, a lot of the fish had went, a lot of the fish had moved, that kind of stuff.
Hardly anything ever came up river. I'll tell you
Well,
that.
we just never had a rain, and so what I'll tell you is that that's true, and throughout the entire time there was fish in that lower section and stuff like that. So I'd be willing to bet that their Rock Creek spawn surveys will be nothing.
Right.
But the main river, lower river spawn counts, when the biologists went out and actually counted the fish, they were like, wow, you guys are correct. There are that many fish. We are seeing, above normal or normal year returns, and so that's why ultimately they decided to reopen the Siletz, even though some of us objected and said, you can't open just the Siletz. So that's why you saw 7 to 10 days later they did some counts in a couple other streams and reopened a couple other rivers as well. But throughout this entire time we worked very hand in hand with the department, trying to let them know what was there, where they could go see fish. Our concerns about them leaving just the Siletz open that whole time, I think they heard that and said we aren't going to open just the Siletz, and then they did ultimately 10 days later on November 10th. But it was kind of an interesting year on that, but we also saw some of the highest coho jack numbers we've ever seen this year, and so it really bodes well that we're going to see a really high abundance of coho next year on the Siletz. And
the coal are running right now pretty good.
Yeah, no, they definitely are. I've definitely talked to people that have been up and fished, up by your place and that kind of stuff the last, week or so and stuff like that. There has been a lot of coho, and the coho were late and the coho were all kinds of things, but the coho jack numbers were really good, and so that was across the entire state. Everywhere you talk to, whether it was here or any rivers, the coho jack numbers were phenomenal, and so the state knows that the coho numbers next year should be really good. So just a good positive.
That's good.
I ran into more feeder Chinook and juvenile coho in the ocean this year than my captain's ever seen in 42 years on the charter boats. We've never seen caught that many out there while targeting coho salmon on our boats.
Wow. Yeah, I fished out there too, and same experience.
Yeah. So there was some, in the midst of all this bad news, there is some good news, and
But he didn't see many Chinook.
yeah.
I was just up at Sunshine Creek, so up in the gorge, and more spawning Chinook up there than I've ever seen.
But isn't it closed up there?
But they're spawning up there, is what I'm saying. So they made it all the way past Moonshine, all the way up in the gorge, but that's 6 miles up the road up there to Sunshine Creek.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of fish that came up on that high water between, that was like a week ago, I was up there, and the last spawning count that were up there spawning. So there's a lot of fish that actually squeaked by and made it up to really good spawning grounds.
Once we finally got rain, that was kind of across.
They come off
That was kind of across all the rivers of the Oregon coast. Is that even Tillamook, where they had the biggest concerns, they actually had pretty good returns up there, and so I think that they're going to see that they were better and stuff like that. So.
And to think at one time that was the deadline, Sunshine was the deadline for Chinook. Don and I worked very hard to get that down to Moonshine.
Yeah.
And then when they seen how well it worked, they said, well, it worked so good, let's move it further down. So.
Well, there's one concern that I have, that we've had good spawning, it sounds like, and we had fish that showed up. But what are their babies going to eat? Because they testified the other night in the BioSolids hearing that they're not seeing the foods that the little ones eat. You don't, they're not. What are the
invertebrates?
Thank you. It's been a long day.
A lot comes into the work that we do. They get a lot of their young fish get a lot of their food from terrestrial vegetation as well, not just macroinvertebrates that are in the water. So
right.
The insects that are found on vine maple and those kind of species that end up falling in the water are a lot of their food source. So that's us getting out there and doing riparian planting and not just doing diverse plantings as well, because different insects will find their ways onto different plants. So it's all part of the picture.
I think that a lot of the stuff we're doing out in the bays right now, where we're kind of opening up some of the offshoot channels that we maybe have. For years we channelized these bays so the water would more freely flow through.
Yep.
We've went back to opening up more areas, opening up more marshland, because we've found that as the tides come up and go down, that those fish use a lot of those areas to feed and stuff like that. And there's no doubt in my mind that once we started addressing habitat, we talked about the chum runs earlier. They've leaps and bounds did really well up until once we started opening up those areas. And so I think that that's something that we've started doing a lot of habitat restoration in these lower rivers to provide more area for those places, for those fish
that's
to find feed.
The big focus of our
Sure.
coho business plan that we've tried to get everyone who's doing coho or any kind of work in the river, restoration work, in the room, and we're trying to kind of open up these life history pathways that
Sure.
coho used to be thought of fish that were in wadable streams, and we need to do all the work up in these wadable streams, and that 20% that wash out in the fall, they're gone. They just die. We don't know, but they found those fish down in the estuaries. They get bigger down in the estuaries. They smolt bigger out to the ocean, and once you get out there, the bigger the better. So we're the big focus of that project, which is different from the 5 other projects that are going on, is restoring all the way from the estuary all the way up to the headwaters, and hitting all those different habitats and finding the bottlenecks and the areas where there's gravel limiting with their spawning. They can still get fry from other systems up into those systems if they have cold water in them, and have summer rearing in areas that don't have a lot of gravel. So
I think all those projects are huge, and I think we're doing a lot of things that are super beneficial to our fish right now. So I think the more of those things we keep doing, the more different stuff like that we keep doing is going to be huge.
Yep. Great. So I think we're kind of into announcements now. Just got a couple things to pass on. So most of you know Wayne Hoffman has retired. He was the coordinator for Mid-Coast for about 15 years. Has been in a policy director position the last 4 years. There he is. He has made it all the way over to North Carolina. He's retiring over there. His wife's family is from over there, so he took his time, drove across the country, birding all the way. He's a big birder. So he's settling over there. He's actually still going to be involved in the coho business plan process, because he's kind of been leading the way in that life history diversity stuff with coho. And then we're not replacing his position right away. Mostly because we could never really replace Wayne.
Sure.
But we are thinking of bringing on some kind of higher technical folks on like a contract basis, because things that Wayne would do would take a dive into the hatchery plan and environmental impact statement of the hatchery plan and submit 60 pages of comments on stuff like that. So thinking of trying to bring in a couple different folks to do that kind of thing, but we did make a decision and are hiring a restoration program assistant. Ari Blatt is going to be joining us next month, January 7th, to take some of my tasks off of me. Some of what she's actually going to be doing is meeting planning stuff, so the Mid-Coast meetings. And then she's also, I think, going to be taking over some of the duties for this council as well for the meetings. So we're really excited to have her on. She's a really good writer. She's going to help us write grants too, to help us out. So she will be around for the next meeting to meet everybody.
So while we're on that subject, I know we're down to like 3 or 4 meetings a year now, and it's one of my pet peeves. It's very difficult to have a good organization meeting that few times a year.
Sure.
And we need to get this thing back up at least every other month if we can. So
yep.
I highly recommend, if you want a successful unit out here to work in the community, that's what we need.
Yep, that's part of the reason we're trying to bring her on is I've just been stretched so thin over the 2.5 years that I've been here. And, so that's part of bringing her on is to try to get a little more life out here. And I mean, we've got this momentum with the BioSolids stuff. We've got, I think this is the biggest turnout we've got for a few months or probably a year or so now. So I think we're right there in a spot to grab that momentum and keep going.
How many projects are you working on? I heard 17 and then you added 3 more? 3 big ones, mind you.
Yeah, we just got, Mid-Coast did just get 2 big grants for the North Creek culvert project up on Drift Creek, getting rid of that 11-foot culvert that's in a 30-foot stream. We'll be hopefully getting that. We're doing contracting for that right now, so that's going to get replaced hopefully next summer. We have did Little Lobster, Largewood this year. Still planting 2 properties out at Bummer Creek. We have 6 properties we're planting at Beaver Creek, Ona Beach, Beaver Creek. Planting element on that Little Lobster project. We're getting another grant in for North Beaver project. So we got a lot going on. I need some help. I've proven good at getting grants. Now I need help getting them all the work done. So, any other announcements?
I'll email you all tomorrow.
Yeah.
And call.
They said they didn't have their
Okay.
info, so.
Yeah, good.
Well, and part of what works for the people out here in Siletz.
Yeah.
I'll also be out actually next week meeting with Stan too. So I could drop off
Put your phone number on there. That'd be perfect.
my cards here at the library even.
Well, mailings work really well for a lot of people in Siletz. And maybe that's some of what we can do, John, is be able to start collecting mailing addresses that people that want.
Anything or emails or whatever they got,
Right.
they want to do.
Right.
I've got, personally, I know 4 or 5 right in my area that specifically would like for the well stuff.
This is exactly how we're gonna get this project off the ground. And so I'm also new, so I'm looking up the phone number of the district.
265.
No, wait.
2631.
265. 2631.
That's the district phone number. She put her phone number on there. So we
okay,
got
great.
her number.
There's coffee and cookies.
Those, did you make
Thank
those
you.
cookies?
Yeah.
They're really good.
Are they?
Everyone should have. Do they have like a buttercream frosting? Yeah. I
Well,
highly
welcome to
recommend the
June's
cookies.
cooking.
Yes.
Not all of us
And
should have one,
coffee.
'cause some of us would have 2 or 3 or 4.
I'm so
Thanks, everybody.
happy to have coffee. Thank
Generally
you.
just water resources, but the research I'm doing is looking at the nexus between food, water, and energy.
Awesome.
So like, as it would apply to this, we would look at,
Are you an undergrad or grad student?
I'm a graduate student.
Oh, cool.
And so what I do is a lot of modeling.
Yeah.
So we'll do like hydrology modeling, ecological modeling. But so looking at this, we look at like the possibility of, instead of using the biosolids as a fertilizer for the food, we look at the benefit you can get using that for energy. And then while also looking at the impacts that it's having on people that you heard from tonight of like Vulcan's Vulcan stream. And then, so what we're kind of doing is trying to make
Scott. Thanks, John. Good to
Nice
see you.
to meet you.
Yep, nice to meet you.
like a decision support tool to help kind of baseline planning
Cool.
and this kind of stuff.
Which program are you in at?
So I'm part of the civil engineering department,
Sweet.
and then the water resources review.
Cool. Are you, it's a master's program or a PhD?
I'm in the end of my master's and then I'm starting my
Oh,
PhD.
cool. So we have you for like another 3 years. Okay. I just came over from the Bonneville Environmental.
Sorry,
Do you know the
The where?
The Bonneville Environmental Foundation.
It sounds familiar, it's probably up along the
But I've never.
It's in Portland, but they work across all of BPA territory. So they started in the late 90s to kind of like take
Yeah.
public utility money and its profits off of damaging our watersheds and then put it back into watershed enhancement projects through watershed councils. And then also renewable energy research and education.
That was there.
So like, kind of like, well, if we want to do all this work, where do we get the money for it? And who's benefiting off of it is key. So, a big interest of mine is getting Lincoln PUD to give us. Yeah. You don't happen to know the Newtown Creek wastewater treatment plant in New York City, do you? That's what I was talking about. That's the one, it's like supposedly the most cutting edge wastewater treatment plant in the country, and that's the one where they have these 4 giant biodigesters and they harvest the methane off of it.
Okay. The area we're researching is up by Hermiston, which if you're from New York, you might know. Hermiston, Oregon is up along the Columbia River.
Oh yeah.
Like northeast, it's by Pendleton.
Yeah. On 84.
So, yeah, on 84. So there's a dairy there that has a digester.
Oh, cool. Did Oregon Energy help them do it?
Probably.
I think my friend worked on it for a
Okay,
decade.
awesome.
Yeah, and he, cool.
Yeah, so there's definitely like
Yeah, it's really easy. That's how they run landfills. All the machinery in landfills is just
Old house is creepy
from the landfill.
There's little gaps.
That's
The whistle.
I didn't hear.
Well, my wife left, but
Are you thinking this would be part of your
well, I had a,
fieldwork or
I was
research
a
of
little
getting
late.
out into
We
the
had our
communities?
this specifically.
Or like interested in, oh no, take them.
I was sitting there, I can't make people drive.
Everybody wants
To get all the
these.
way out here.
We need to leave some here at the library.
I can use some here.
I think I picked one up at the extension office, but I'm taking
Oh,
another
okay.
one just in case.
It's all around there.
It is
Have you worked with paint names at all at NRCS?
Driving around on Forest Hill
No,
Road,
no, She helps give resources and technical assistance to farmers in the area. And your name seems familiar when I saw it written down.
I completed an online survey. I'm not sure who put that out.
Is it about water?
It was about our water and
okay.
the impact on nature and the environment. So I put that
Started to make noise.
out. And I'm in the.
Well, I agree with you, but I don't think you still have.
So, actually, I'm Master Gardener starting in January, yes.
That's cool. Mike was trying to get.
Are you gonna do the course?
Yeah.
Deadline for signing it says,
Mom told me about it. I was like,
she'll hook you up. She'll let you in.
Yeah.
She'll let you in.
And you were already accepted.
Cool.
I haven't filled out the application, but I think it's a good way to get. Also, just being new to the district.
You'll get to
I'm
know
like getting
local
to know a lot of
people,
folks.
local
Yeah.
players, people who are out doing stuff.
and get involved in other just volunteering.
Yeah, I want to be involved here since we live out here.
Yeah.
But we've only been out here about 3 years.
Oh, okay.
So I have the bones to a greenhouse, but I don't have it put up yet. I'm
Oh, okay.
Doing what's
farming
best.
it over, but I'm not.
So I'm
And
not
he's
pretty
not
sure.
being, he's not being.
Oh.
I know I
Were we four as well?
That was pretty interesting.
Oh, okay.
6 months.
Cool. You went to Newport High?
Yes.
We're gonna live right here in Newport. Or no, we already have the house. Now I have to
Ice
use
popper
the same
field
map.
You live in Newport?
I do. I live in Newport.
It's near the high school?
Today.
It's right by their church.
Yeah, on
I was
6th.
questioning the
6th Street?
setback
Yeah.
by the river.
Yeah, did he ever come out and measure it off?
Yeah,
for
we
you?
should remember it.
I will be
Yeah, I
out
like the
there
neighborhood a lot.
personally
And they have
myself
really-
to check it. And I said,
Really kick-ass
okay.
new biology teacher there.
Yeah.
Later, we
Oh,
got an
my
email saying,
son,
oh,
my
the
other
guy
son
at
is a
Point
freshman
Trent.
and he
had him
has
go out
her
and he
and oh
tasted it off and he
boy,
said, yeah,
he was
Cool.
amazed that she
what happened to you doing?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that's your
Said
problem.
it's a
Education.
every
You
time
don't
I
send
walk
to
in
the
the
guy
class
that
where
goes
they
to
went,
the
hi
check
Henry, how you
each
doing?
other.
Because she
field between
is a
you and
good
the store.
teacher.
It's so narrow. If they do the
Yeah.
setbacks
So
off the
your
river
brother
and off
is
the highway.
Linda,
freshman
left.
high school.
yeah, there's nothing left.
Almost.
Yeah, there's, that field is real
Your
narrow.
mouse are
Closer to well,
Yeah,
on the
that's your
side,
nice
but
family.
nobody even
We're
talked
trying.
Look at that.
I'm, my well's on this side of it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I
Well,
look
it's the same
forward
way
to.
with
I'll
that
send
little patch.
everybody an email
They're
and
just on the other side of the
other
church.
people I will
And
bring
those
a
people
card.
that have built that new house
I'm pretty
there.
brain dead right
That
now.
is
But
the narrow
Do you
strip
have the
that
card
can
that
make
I
all
got?
3 runs in the
Because
summer,
actually
and that
we
would be
had some
about it.
people come onto our property and in our section of the river, they put a measuring
I
device
said,
out
you take
there
a
over
200
the
foot
summer.
setback from the river.
I'm not sure who that
200 foot
was.
setback
But
from
they
that
came and
well,
asked,
200 foot
who
setback
was
from
it?
the well on the other side.
USGS.
I says,
Okay.
you have
Okay.
So we had the device
I
right in
said,
our.
yeah.
Was it like the size of
They're
this
gonna send the
table?
information.
No,
Back
it
of
was
the
like
truck?
about like this,
This is
and
what
they
we're
had it
trying.
anchored
And
to
you
a
got
tree
those
and they
10
just
acres.
came
Cool.
and picked it up
They're
towards the
all
end of
6
summer.
acres.
Cool.
So they're putting almost double the amount they could.
Yeah, but if you're also interested in
Oh, no,
like,
he said, I can't get
hey,
it.
you have like
How do
30
you know? Because
years
you don't even know what
of
the
salmon
setback is.
data, we do.
I asked you.
So we're like connecting
He said, no,
with
they have to do the setback. They do the
communities to
setback.
hear
How
about
do you know?
these kinds of
But
things.
they're doing,
Yeah, that's also definitely.
Can't get there from here.
Yeah, that'd be
I mean,
awesome.
that just-
My
just
PhD
will
would
not-
have a lot more freedom.
no, you won't.
And my professor's gonna let me kind of expand on what we're doing in Northeast Oregon, and I can kind of bring it home.
Cool.
And we're here, and a lot of us like the respiratory modeling where we
We don't get anywhere that way either,
kind of coordinate.
but I do think with the county commissioners on
Yeah.
our side.
To hear from the stakeholders.
Um,
That would be super.
Yeah,
And
That's-
there's also
that's
something else you might be
something.
interested
Well,
in. So it's the same thing you took that survey for. It's called the
through
Mid-Coast
the
Water
I
Plan.
got one more thing that just don't work.
And we're part of that too. And it's this cool pilot, I know.
legal firm.
Well, that's not bad.
You lose your pin?
Take on.
The Mid-Coast Water.
Bye, nice to see you too.
Thank you.
It was nice to meet you.
Well, you know.
I'll take one, I didn't get one.
Another one.
They're delicious.
Well, I had that list of all the people that I sent to print it off for you, all those people that commented, signed up and commented. That was 28 people right there.
Just be careful, because you can get too much, because it's thick, you know, when you.
And,
Oh yeah, and then it'll melt off onto the plate.
we need to have.
Nice to
their
see you.
brother.
Oh,
Thank
happy
you, dear.
Christmas.
I
Merry
appreciate it.
Christmas.
Yeah, I'm gonna take them
Time,
through
I
the
didn't realize what time it was.
Well,
No
that's
thing
what she
you
did.
get Christmas?
And she wanted,
Terrible idea.
and
Worst
before
idea
Ted
ever.
got cancer, and he did.
Oh, no.
Oh, twist my arm. Oh, thank you. Those are delicious. Very good.
Our kids are grandkids.
Oh, yeah, my grandkids.
But people with the board, the pilot
Was that Mid-Coast Water Council?
partnership.
June, thank you. Thank you so much.
That's good.
You might be interested in coming to a working group that I'm part of, the self-suppliers working group, because it's people with a vested interest in water safety
I've been gone all day.
over time with a change in climate.
Okay.
The other ones are like.
So have I, John. I went all the way to Salem today.
Keeping water in the stream. And then the third one is municipalities, you might be interested in that one as well.
Be interested in all
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I know. But it's a cool pilot that the state started. They started 4 groups like this, where it's a regional effort in getting all the players, including community members, in, although I think there should be more community members represented, like biology teachers and
Right.
PTAs. Like everybody has an interest in water quality. But 2 pilots were fully funded and the other 2 were half funded. So they're also playing with like, how does, what's the best way to fund something? Because sometimes if you fund something 100%, it also doesn't become sustainable because you're like resting on
Is that Dawn dish soap over there? Is that Dawn dish soap over there?
Whatever you call it.
Yeah.
initiative.
Okay, Evan, you have to wash my
Yeah,
cup.
so
I can't
one
do
is
it.
here, so this is one regional effort.
I don't want to die again.
Putting all the brains together and all the interests together, thinking about water security in a changing climate. And then the other one that's fully funded is in Grand Ronde. And the other 2, do you know where the other 2 water planning pilots are?
Harney and Malheur.
Okay.
Yeah.
Harney is half funded, or Malheur is. That part doesn't matter. But I think it's also super cool because from the state level, people are thinking about interdisciplinary decision making and climate planning.
That's like cool.
And that's really important, and it's not happening in every state.
It's not happening anywhere.
It's barely happening. Yeah. So I can send you more info on that because it's public research.
Yeah.
Welcome to attend it. It sounds like it would really match up with your PhD interest.
Yeah. I can give you a card.
Yeah, cool.
Can I have one too?
Yeah, of course. And I'm happy.
Because I'm a partner in that. Standing on my own.
And I'm happy.
What a cool lab you're in.
What's that?
What a cool lab you're in.
Does it say hydroinformatics?
No, just like what you were talking about.
Oh yeah, so we're actually.
I should have gone to Oregon State for grad school. But
I love Oregon State.
I went to U of O because I'm not that smart. No, I went because they paid me to go there.
Oh yeah.
That's a good reason.
So like, yeah, sign me up.
So I'm funded through part of the Infuse project, which is the USDA and the National Science Foundation. Their kind of effort to push towards resilience planning through like
Cool.
interdisciplinary work.
Sweet. Very, very cool. Yeah, I know they're even looking for an administrative assistant right now.
Ooh.
We have to figure out where they can be located, but I personally did. I just finished grad school last year, 2 years ago, 2017, whenever that was.
A couple of years ago.
Now it's like 15 years ago. But I found it valuable to like get a job in what I was studying also. Like I worked for the city of Eugene while I was in grad school. I was like, oh, I'm doing my field work. I can buy groceries.
That's cool.
It
That's
was
always
very helpful.
bonus.
Yeah. So you're located in Corvallis.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's cool. So you're trying to make your project about where you grew up. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll see you at the extension office.
For sure. Actually,
What's your
I'm
name again? I'm sorry.
Christy Kine.
Christy.
I'm going to try to make the commissioners meeting tomorrow just because a friend of mine's being sworn in as one of the new commissioners.
Oh,
Katie.
Katie. Okay, cool.
So
We're excited to have her.
Yeah.
We have. Do you know Kelsey Miller?
sounds very, very
She worked
familiar.
at the extension office.
Do you have an extra card? Because I bet somebody I want to share
No,
with.
that's one of
Absolutely.
our fish surveyors. Our
Okay.
bio surveyors now, but
Okay.
we're really excited to have the new county commissioner.
I'll make sure it gets to the right person.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think if I get in the office at like 7 tomorrow, I can make that meeting.
No problem. You better go home and get to bed.
Yeah. Are we
Get
wearing
some
like
sleep.
the same sweater but in different colors?
I thought maybe there was an
You have a
uniform.
nice like V